I was working with Procter & Gamble, for Procter & Gamble, and we were working on the acquisition of the Clairol Company. And I was one of the leads in that project. And on Friday, I learned that I needed to be in London Monday morning. So on Saturday, I left, got there Sunday, had the meeting Monday, and then Tuesday morning, which was 9/11, I left from the London airport back to Cincinnati. About 4 hours out of London, the pilot got on. And anyone who flies internationally knows that you listen to the pilot probably 20 minutes into your flight, saying, have a good flight and all of that, and about 20 minutes before you land saying we're about to land. So when the pilot gets on 4 hours into the flight, you know something's a bit different. And he basically said that there's something with the plane that they'd like to have checked out, and we're going to be landing in Newfoundland. And at the time, he wasn't exactly sure where. And then a few minutes later, he came back on and said that we would be landing in Gander, Newfoundland. Everyone was trying to figure out, what is the issue. So there was nothing said about what had happened in the United States. As we were landing into Gander, we saw all these other jumbo jets down there. And that's when we really started to wonder what was going on, because obviously it wasn't a problem with our plane when you could see all the other planes that were sitting on the runway. The pilot got on the phone and said, if anyone has a cell phone that works, please make a phone call and see what information you can get. Apparently, the pilot was not told, at least on our flight, what had actually had happened, because there was fear that perhaps there was a problem on our flight. With all the global traveling I did, I had an international cell phone, and I was actually able to make a call, and I knew my wife was teaching, so she wouldn't answer the phone. So, who do you call? You call your mother. And I called my mother in Milwaukee, and I said, what's going on? And she said, what do you mean what's going on? Where are you? And I said, well, we're in Gander, Newfoundland right now. I said, what happened? And she went on to explain what had happened. And I told her that we were safe, and I hung up, and I went to the cockpit and told the pilot, and he handed me the microphone for the airplane and asked me to update the plane. So I basically told the plane what I knew based on the conversation that I had with my mother. I offered my cell phone to people to make phone calls, because obviously there were a lot of people who were concerned and so on, and we got to a situation where the batteries were running out. The person in front of me did not have his phone. His phone was in the cargo hold, but by chance, he had a power adapter that fit my phone. So what we did is we plugged the power adapter in the outlet in the airplane, attached it to my phone, and that basically became our phone booth for the entire plane. When I finally got home a few days later, I called Verizon. And I said, I want you to know that my phone and Verizon was the only phone on that plane that worked, and I just want to thank you for that. And they said, hold on a second. And they looked up and they said, you're right. You made like $1,400 worth of phone calls. And they said, hold on, please. About 2 minutes later, they came back on the phone and they said, don't worry about it. We're comping it. So I still have the telephone bill from that day with all these calls made to France and Germany and a couple countries in Africa and so on, with a $1,400 credit at the bottom of it. We quickly ran out of food. But then throughout those hours that followed, the Canadian Red Cross came and delivered not real nutritious, but candy bars and potato chips and just things that they found that they could provide us. The school buses drove up, and we got in the school bus, and they took us to the terminal, and then we went through immigration, and then back on the school buses. We actually, our plane, along with a Continental plane that I think was bound for Houston, we went to a small town called Gambo. So while we landed in Gander, we ended up in Gambo, and it's basically a one-street town, probably 500 residents. It's got a little, very small little store, a couple of churches, a volunteer fire department, and that's and a tavern. Our bus first drove up to the volunteer fire department, and I got out with my laptop, and they had cots all set up, and it looked kind of busy and everything. And I said, well, maybe there's other options. So I noticed that there was a church about a half a block away where they were bringing people. So I walked over to the church, and that's where I stayed for the 4 nights. Probably around 5 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and I smelled breakfast, and it smelled great. So we go into the kitchen area, and the people from Gambo cooked this wonderful breakfast for us: eggs and ham and moose, and it was terrific. They had been up all night cooking for us, not only for breakfast but for lunch, and then also for dinner. And one of the women who did that, we later found out, was celebrating her 75th birthday. So we went and we found a birthday card, and we signed it from the Plain people. And we presented it to her, and she had tears running down her eyes, and she says, "This is the best birthday I've ever had." I remember being at the church asking folks, is there a place in town where we could go have some drinks? And they said, well, yes, it's this tavern down at the other side of town. And they said, if you'd like, we'll bring you there. So that was probably my first experience with Uber before Uber was Uber, where people from the church just brought their cars, and they basically waited for us and took us to the tavern, and then they stayed there, and when we had to come back, they drove us back. It was as much fun as you can have considering what's going on. Again, it's that guilt that I think everyone had, that you can't have too much fun because you have to know what's going on back at home. Not only did they land 37 or 38 planes inside of probably a 2-hour window with a limited staff, but also that they were able to basically put 7,500 people in the homes, in the churches, in the VFW halls, and the fire stations, and so on. It was absolutely incredible. And some of the things they did for us as well. Canadian Bell brought a bank of phones, and people could use those phones at no charge. So of course that was very helpful for everyone. Canadian Broadcasting Company brought in a satellite dish so that we could listen to news from the U.S. The first time we saw the planes hit the tower was not until Wednesday night. It was a very, very different flight. We were now a family. Typically when I fly, and I think it's true of 90% of the people who fly, you sit down, you don't talk to anybody. You just do your own thing, you read your magazine, you sleep, whatever. This was very different. The pilot made it a point to go down both aisles of the plane and shake hands with everyone on the plane, saying thank you for your patience and for being a good person throughout all of this. It was very, very touching. It's pretty special. It was very special. People were outstanding on both sides. The people in the plane, the people taking care of us, the whole situation. That's what I remember.